Hello and welcome to the Heaven Bound Podcast. My name is Jason Harden. I'm here with Roger Schaus, and we're opening the Bible in search of fuel for your spiritual journey. This is where we talk about life the way it was meant to be and what it means to be a disciple of Jesus in the 21st century. Wherever you are, thanks for joining us on the journey today.
We're so glad to have you with us. And on Fridays, we try to pick a theme for the month. And here we are in the month of February. And February for us is kind of a transition month. It's still, as it starts, still wintertime, still kind of cold. Pro football is about to wrap up with the Super Bowl. But by the end of the month, things are getting warmer, and we're knocking on the door of spring starting, and baseball will be firing up. And there's a lot of transition from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. And that's kind of a unique thing about February here in Indiana. That happens quite a bit. And so with that in mind, we want to talk this month about change. Change is coming. The old Bob Dylan back in the 1960s had a song, Times Are Changing. And he was talking about some of the protest movements back in the 60s and the hippies and all those kind of things. But that's true to life, is that life changes. And as we look in our Bibles, we're going to talk about several different aspects of this. We notice it does for us personally. I mean, as you get a few miles on you, you look in the mirror and think, oh boy, things have changed. We see that in congregations. People move in, people move out, people pass away. The eldership changes, preachers come, preachers go. There's that element of change within that. That happens within the family dynamics. You start off with a young couple. Then babies are born, then babies grow up, and they move out, and there's this constant change that takes place. For our congregation here, we have gone through COVID a few years ago, and we were not passing the Lord's Supper. We had individual packets everyone got. Well, just recently we went back to passing the emblems once again. It was a little bit difficult for some people at the very first to do that. Why? Because we are introducing change, and change is hard. We get accustomed to certain things, certain ways, and when something new comes about, we often resist it, and we don't like it. I like the old ways, but life doesn't hold on to that. Life changes whether we want them or not. You may want that 2-year-old to be a 2-year-old forever, but it's not going to happen. You get a little kitten, and it's so cute and fun, and you want that little kitten to stay a kitten. Well, he's going to grow up to be a fat old cat one day. That's what happens in life. But what we need to look at and what we're going to explore as we go through this month is, what does it do to our faith? And how do we handle change? And for some, they do better than others. And this is something I think it's fair to talk about, layer it different ways as we will this month, and look at some passages to kind of help us to deal with this very aspect. One of the things we need to realize, whether we know it or not, we're on kind of an elevator or a people mover. As you think about the airport, we are moving, and you can't stop that. And so how we deal with that has a lot to do with our faith and our walk with the Lord.
Yeah. I have always appreciated one of our classic hymns. It is pushing 200 years old, and it reminds us of change and decay, right? This great hymn, Abide With Me. Many of the hymns that we sing, obviously there's a whole spectrum of things that we sing about and focal points that are brought out through hymns. I've always found Abide With Me fascinating because that phrase, that idea is not something that we often sing about. Like you have already highlighted, Roger, we don't like change, especially when it comes to the church and what we are comfortable with. Change can come to be very, very hard. But this author, Henry Francis Lyte, all the way back in 1847, wrote Change and Decay in All Around I See. That is the stuff of life, right? And yet, the last line of that second verse points us to stability. O thou who changest not, abide with me. And so there is the tension that I think would be great to explore over the next few weeks. We serve a God who does not change. James chapter 1 and verse 17 highlights that every good gift, every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. We don't have to worry about waking up tomorrow morning and suddenly God isn't there, or God has changed his address and we have no idea where he is. And yet, like this conversation will bear out, Lord willing, over the next few weeks, change is an undeniable part of life. And how do we deal with that as disciples? That's a good discussion to have.
And I think one of the first places I go to is in the book of Joshua, chapter 1 and verse 2. Probably the shortest funeral ever given. It says, Moses, my servant, is dead. And now, therefore, arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I'm giving to them, to the sons of Israel. And that simple statement, Moses is dead, now get up and arise, we see a transition and a change. For 40 years, it was Moses. For 40 years, it was Moses going up that mountain to see God. We even call the law of Moses. It was Moses and Pharaoh, Moses and the plagues, Moses and the Red Sea. Over and over and over, for 40 years, it was Moses. Now, on this new day, Moses isn't anymore. Joshua's at the helm. Now, Joshua had been mentored by Moses. Joshua was at the mountain several times with Moses. Joshua was right beside Moses several times, but it was always Moses' leadership. Now it's Joshua. He's younger. He's not Moses. His voice is not going to sound like Moses. He doesn't have all the mileage that Moses did. He didn't have all the experience that Moses did. And how easy it would be to say, you know what? I don't like this Joshua guy, and I'm not going to follow him. But what's interesting, right after this, that declaration in verse 2, God says in verse 3, every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses. Just as I spoke to Moses, I'm speaking to you. He says in verse 5, just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. So God was letting Joshua know, yes, there's a change. You're not Moses. Your name starts with a J. But you know what? I'm still with you. And really nothing changes because our relationship remains the same. That's a powerful thing for us to begin this little discussion with, because a lot of times I've seen through the years people just really get their feathers all ruffled up when there's a change in the family, change in church, a change at work. You've been driving down this same road forever, and now they put a roundabout there. Why did they do that? My favorite store has closed. My favorite this or that has gone out of business, and we just fall apart because we don't like change. One thing, as we notice, God does it. And not only is the Lord the same, his word is the same. And that's something we need to appreciate. The word of God that helped brethren through the Civil War, the word of God that helped brethren through the turbulent 60s, the word of God that helped our grandparents and our great-grandparents is the same word for us. Every once in a while on my iPhone, I'll get this little update. Or they're going to update your phone. God never does that. God doesn't update his Bible. And the message today, that is the same message that worked 100 years ago and 200 years ago. And if there's another 200 years, it will be the same word that still works there. And that helps us as we think about this stability.
Yeah, well, and his word, right in the heart of his word, assures us that beautiful things can come from change, right? Ecclesiastes chapter 3, this classic passage about for everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven. By the time that it's done, he assures us in Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 11, God has made everything beautiful in its time. Everything? Well, that list begins with there is a time to be born and there is a time to die. You talk about the extremes of changes, right? Where a family of two suddenly becomes a family of three, or a couple who has been together for 60 years, suddenly one is burying the other. That is a tremendous time of change. Like you said, here in this part of the world, we are experiencing very slowly a change in the seasons. There is a time to plant, and there is a time to pluck up what is planted. On and on and on it goes. But in these extremes of life and the various experiences of life, I think an anchor point for this discussion, Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11, God has made everything beautiful in its time. As hard as it would have been to be without Moses, you think about how beautiful the very idea of rest for 120-year-old Moses would have been. And the fact that his death was not the end of his existence, right? He shows up at the transfiguration of Jesus himself. He's talked about throughout the New Testament. We know God is the God of the living, right? Even that transition from life to death to beyond death, there is a beautiful thing about that. And so change is a part of life. Change doesn't have to be terrible, but how do we maintain our faith and our stability in the midst of change? Roger, that's the challenge, right?
It is. And I think of like Hebrews 13 verse 8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That bedrock, that stability that we can have, that should help us. And so when we think about change, sometimes, the reason why we fight it is because it's new and it's unknown to us. And sometimes we think, well, I'm not going to I'm real comfortable with where I'm at. I'm comfortable in my house, driving down these same roads, going to my same favorite store. Those are very familiar places. But what we find with change is sometimes it's new chapters in our lives, new excitement, new things. And it can be better. And it's hard for us to understand that. Let me tell you a personal story about my family. Both my wife and I are from Indiana. Everybody in our family lives in Indiana. We've always been in Indiana. And there came a time several years ago that I had the opportunity to move to Kansas City to preach. Now, I've driven through Kansas City, but I've never been in Kansas City. I knew not one person in Kansas City. Our 4 kids were all in different levels of school. Here in Indiana, my son had started taking German in middle school, and he started high school with German 3. Well, we moved to Kansas City. That school system there didn't even offer German. He was advancing very highly in the band. He's playing French horn, very well in French horn. Well, our first band concert out there, in the middle of the concert, they stopped because the kid's instrument broke and fell around the stage. We went to a high school volleyball game. My daughter was playing volleyball at the time, and we went to see what a high school game was like. And I remember we were sitting behind the high school girls. Every one of them was blonde, which my daughter was not. Everyone was 6 foot tall, which my daughter was not. So we moved out there, and I'll never forget. We moved in October. And that very first Christmas, all 4 kids put the same thing on the Christmas list. Let's move back to Indiana. And I wonder if we made a mistake. But through the process, new doors were opened. My son didn't go band. He went choir, and he excelled in college in the honor choirs. My daughter got to excel in volleyball, played college volleyball because of the situation there. And so it just opened new doors. Now, at first it's scary. At first it's risky, and we're asking ourselves, did we make a mistake in doing this? But that's what change does. And one of the things we need to see is we can resist change, and something better, maybe even a blessing from God, is awaiting us. And we just got to get out of that comfortable chair and give it a try.
Yeah. Well, I truly appreciate that story, and I think it has many different applications. But I want to zero in on that word that you just used, comfortable. just because we're comfortable doesn't mean we're in the best position, right? Just because we're comfortable doesn't mean we're in a healthy position or a spiritual position, the spiritual position that we ought to have. And I think the only place that you need to go in the Bible to drive that point home, read Jesus's communication to the churches in Revelation 2 and 3. In the first few verses of Revelation 2, you hear Jesus addressing the church in Ephesus, and they've got a lot going for them, right? But they had abandoned the love that they had at first. They needed to remember where they had come from. They had grown too comfortable. On the other end of those communications, obviously, we've got Laodicea. And Jesus says in Revelation 3, verse 15, I know your works. You're neither cold nor hot. Would you that you were either cold or hot? So because you are lukewarm. You're just right there in the middle. You've been sitting there so long, the temperature has just regulated to what is going on around you. You can hear these various churches. Laodicea themselves says in verse 17, I'm rich, I've prospered, I need nothing. I'm comfortable. I don't want anything to change, right? And yet, just because you're comfortable doesn't mean you're good with the Lord, who said, in my eyes, you're wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. And so just because I'm comfortable where I am doesn't mean change isn't exactly what is needed to help me grow or mature, get out of those comfort zones, whatever it is that we're talking about.
And I think about Mark 16, verse 15, when Jesus told those apostles, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Before the Lord had called them, most of them were fishermen, most of them were Galileans, very comfortable, lived in their little villages, life was good. Now they were going to go places they would never go to. They would never, ever go to Samaria, never being a Jewish. But that's what they would do. They would travel to faraway places where they would not even know the names of it probably at the time, but they would go because that's what the Lord wanted them to do. Great change came about. And because of that, look what happened to the kingdom of God. It expanded and it grew. And so sometimes change forces us to do some things that we probably wouldn't do. But by doing that, it may take us to a higher level and a deeper level with the Lord. And so it is so easy just to stay at home and be comfortable and just do the same routine over and over and over again. But sometimes we lose our focus in doing that. And sometimes we just take our foot off the accelerator spiritually when we do that. And so this idea of change can be very, very helpful for us.
Yeah. One more reference from Revelation chapter 3, just to drive your point home. That church in Philadelphia, Jesus says, there is a synagogue of Satan among you. I mean, what must it have been like to live in Philadelphia? And yet he says, I've set before you an open door. You know what that is? That's going to involve change, right? And that change may involve an open door for me individually. It may be an open door for me and my family. It may be an open door where some in the life of our church family have walked out and others have walked in. Change is a part of family life and church family life. It may be someone going through the door of death or coming through the door of birth. Whatever it is, we anchor ourselves to the God who does not change. We trust him when he says life is all about change and he has made everything beautiful in its time. And along the way, all right, in these various areas of life, our individual lives, our family lives, our church family life, we navigate this with faith. That was the faith that God was challenging Joshua to have, right? To bring this full circle where we started. How many times he tells him in Joshua chapter 1, be strong and courageous. Things are changing, right? You be strong and courageous. You walk with me by faith. He's telling the children of Israel, right? At the beginning of Deuteronomy, you've got an entirely new generation on the doorstep of the promised land. Unimaginable change in the lives of those people. What does he tell them? Be strong and courageous. You walk with me by faith. Roger, the circumstances are different, but that is exactly what disciples of Jesus are called to do and be in every single generation.
Yeah, no matter where I'm at, the circumstances, I'm to walk with the Lord and honor him. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27 is appointed man wants to die, and after this, a judgment. We want to go to heaven, but guess what? It's not going to be here. That's going to involve a change, isn't it? And we look forward to that change. Paul, as he would write in 2 Corinthians, talks about how we long to be with the Lord. He'd say that in the book of Philippians, how he longs to be with the Lord. And so, change happens. The bigger question is, what happens to me because of it?
Yeah.
And I can grump and complain and just look in the rearview mirror and wish things were like the old days, And Solomon even talks about that in the book of Ecclesiastes. Don't think the old days were the better days. We sometimes as we get older, we talk about that, the good old days, and we forget how difficult the good old days were and how stressful they were. And to realize each day presents opportunities. Each day gives me chances to honor my God and to walk with him. And the new adventures, that's how you got to look at it. New chapters, new adventures. Don't be afraid of them. Just embrace them and see that God will help you through those things. And that's this concept of dealing with change.
All right. So change is coming. Roger, I know you've earmarked 3 different areas of life for our next 3 discussions throughout Fridays in February. Where are we going to look over the next few weeks?
We're going to talk about change in our family, and we mentioned that already. It happens. We're going to talk about change in the church, our church family. There's a lot of different layers in there. And then we're going to talk about change in our lives personally, whether we talk about our faith as it grows, we talk about our health, we talk about the different relationships we have. But in those 3 major areas, there's change. And sometimes there's movement in all of them at the same time. And that can really get somebody just kind of upset because they feel like nothing is constant, nothing is stable, because changes in my life, changes in my family, changes at church, all going on at one time. But one thing that doesn't change, that's the Lord. And that's what we got to hold on to.
He is our rock. He is our refuge, to borrow from so many of the different Psalms. Change is coming. That will be our focal point on Fridays throughout the month of February. This first part, life is all about change. Roger, I appreciate you joining me today. And of course, we truly appreciate all of you for listening to the Heaven Bound podcast. We hope our conversation has helped you set your mind on things above and given you a little more fuel for this journey that involves all sorts of changes. Always remember, when you're walking with Jesus, you're heaven bound, and the best is yet to come.